Stay here? Over the other side. Yeah? Okay. We're good? Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay, great. My name's Shane Cooper. I've been working with Methanex for about 2.5 years now. My background is I have over 25 years experience in what we call in Methanex project services, or also referred to as project controls. And it's basically the planning, scheduling, estimating, budgeting, and reporting for capital projects. So most of the discussion is going to be around project control and project reporting, more focused on reporting and what we do to develop reports for projects and project services. Here we go. Just before we go through, I'd like to invite if anyone has a safety moment they'd like to share with us, or no? Oh, one from me. Recently, I live in Ireland, which is, because of the accent, it's just off the UK, right? It's the island of Ireland. And we're just going into our winter season. So what we've noticed this past weekend is we had our first serious cold storm, which was not as cold as it gets here, but it was a hailstorm. And what we really found in the village I live in is that people just did not adapt to the road conditions. Overnight, we had a whole bunch of ice. It come down, roads were really slippery, footpaths were really slippery. So we had, in the first morning, we had like 3 car accidents in a village of a couple hundred people, where normally there's none. So what that highlighted for me was just to be aware of changing conditions on the roads as weather changes come in and the seasons change. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to run through just a really quick overview of project controls, just so to get us all on the same page of what the subject is. Then I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically on project control and reporting for projects. After that, we're going to talk specifically around earned value management. Earned value management is like it's a subset of project control and reporting, but what it allows us to do is to combine schedule, cost, and progress into one reporting method. It just helps provide a very succinct, a very high level summary of where a project is at any point in time. And then I'm going to look at a case study, the OCI Beaumont methanol plant, which is a plant built in Texas, where we had some engineers' reports, and we looked at this project as a study. We identified that there could be some problems with it. And using the methodology of earned value management, we did a quick analysis. And I just want to run through how we did that analysis, what the forecast was. And we did this work we did it back in February this year. And now you can start to see what the results are. Just compare our forecast to what is currently happening on the project, just to it'll help validate the earned value management approach to project reporting. And then we'll just run through some summary comments and any questions. As we go through, if anybody has any questions, please interrupt. We want to make this as interactive as possible instead of just me talking. Okay. So an overview. In Methanex, we follow what we call a stage-gated process. It's a phased development of projects from someone has an idea of a project, we go through the screening, selection, we go through various study phases. It involves project teams through the whole development phase, and it establishes a framework for us to manage and develop the projects. And for project services, it helps us to manage the contractors and suppliers that work with us. Each project phase definition, we just get more and more defined in the project. We get better definition, we get better understanding. When it comes to control and reporting, we're really talking around the feed and execution phases. This is where the project control and reporting methods are what we focus most on for project control. In project services, we're doing lots of estimating and scheduling in the earlier phases to set up the baseline for a project to measure against. So what we like to do is get involved as early as possible in the project in its development phase. That gives us the opportunity to help structure the project and the information management systems within the project with the project teams, so that we all understand what the project's about and how we want to report it, and we get to understand better what's most important in the project. What are the things we really want to watch and take a lot of a notice of? The key aspects to any project that we look at gets down to scope, price, productivity, and schedule. So as we go through the process of development and evaluation, it's these four aspects of scope, price, productivity, and schedule from a project services point of view that we're focusing on the most. So fundamental to all projects is scope and strategy. That is what, for a project services guy, really sets out what's important for us. We need to know the scope is clear, and we need to know that there's a strategy in place to execute a project. Scope is a multiplier, and it is the key to getting the project forecast accurate. We put most of our emphasis on scope, and defining the scope is always a function of time and money spent. For a turnaround, that'll be the number of inspections and testing that gets done before we actually start the work. Then we start looking at strategy. Essentially gets down to different types of contracts and how we're going to engage service providers and how much control we want over the project through its execution phase. We go through different types of complete turnkey, where we issue a contract to a contractor to build, design, build, and just hand us back the key, hence the term turnkey. And we go through various other forms of lump sum, unit rate, right down to fully reimbursable, where we would just pay for every dollar that was spent. The strategy in fact affects the type of control that we as Methanex would like to have over a project. How much control do we want to have? How much say do we want to have in what the contractor does on a day-to-day basis? You go from maximum control to very little control. Where there's turnkey, a contractor is highly motivated, they've got a lump sum price on the table, they need to finish it as fast and as cost effective for them so they make the most money. But if we do that, Methanex relinquish control. We have very little say on how they do that work. I think it'd be fair to say as an organisation, we're moving more towards owner control, being Methanex control, than we are to handing over control to contractors. So just before I go into project control and reporting, is there any questions around what project services is about, how we approach things? Okay. So for project controls, the key objective is really to, as we work through a project, right from development phase through execution to finish, we want to progressively build confidence in how accurate we can forecast a project. We want to know as soon as possible what the end date's going to be, and we want to know what the total cost is going to be before we get there. So the key objectives for us on that is we do regular project status, whether it's weekly, monthly. Sometimes it's done quarterly, but it needs to be regular and predictable and on the same frequency. We want to know what the total cost will be. It's where we use a cost report, and we want to know when it's going to finish. So in order to get those key objectives in place, there's a few things we need to have done or be put in place in the process of defining the project. There's a lot of documentation around the plans. We have estimates that are built up on quantities of pipe, quantities of steel, quantities of cable. All these quantities and definitions that we use are what we've set as a baseline and then the basis for our reporting systems that we set up later on in the project. We need a good schedule and cost. So we have the estimate scheduled, we have the estimate planned and phased in accordance with the schedule. It's agreed and it's understood by the project team. By that we mean everybody in the project understands what their budget is and when they're going to spend it and what work they've got to have done and when they're going to have it done by. We have comprehensive data collection systems. It's what we call the MECI principle, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. We have to have a data collection system in place that encompasses the total project. Nothing is left out, but nothing's counted twice either. We integrate cost, schedule, and progress performance tools, so we set up databases and database systems to aggregate all this data and information we have. And we have change and risk management processes in place that will keep the project team informed of changes as they're identified. And it's really an opportunity to get mitigation in place. It's an opportunity for somebody to identify a change, let management know, come up with a plan that will mitigate that, and gives us more time to accurately forecast the total project. So the key aspects of project controls is we do a lot of work with systems and codes and databases, but what we're really looking to do is to come up with accurate, which is the latest data that's validated. It's got to be understood and real, not just a perception. It's got to be available for us in time. It's no point being exactly precise, but too late to do anything about it. We've got to be consistent, so it's got to be reported on the same basis time and time again. Informative, it's got to be able to be explained, it's got to explain something, it's got to be able to be interpreted. It needs to mean something to the people who are going to use this information, and it's got to be relevant. The people who get it need to know that they can use it and trust it. So why have project controls? A lot of companies will say that this is just a part of management. It really doesn't bring much value. Why go to all this effort of setting project control and reporting up as an independent function of a project? Various studies have been done in the past. PEM book, which is a project management book of knowledge, it's a body of people who put together the best practices of project management. Of the 39 processes for project management, they've defined 21 around project control. And it's got to be execution is based on a robust project plan. And once you have a plan in place, you need to be measuring against that plan. To measure against that plan, you need to have the methodology to measure against the plan. And that is really what project control is. So the other thing we hear about project controls is it's a waste of money. Why we want to spend all this money? There's been various studies done. The bottom line of it is that the project services and project controls cost somewhere between 0.5% and 2 or 3% of a total project. Out of those studies, they showed that there's cost improvements of more than 10%. So it pays for itself maybe 4 or 5 times over when it's set up and run properly. It supports a continuous learning concept of plan, manage, do, measure. Plan, manage, do, measure. So this is really what project controls, the function will actually support. We support planning, we support the managing, the measuring. We monitor what gets done, and then we analyze it and report it back for continuous improvement. So project control reporting, this is a summary of what pretty much we would find in any project report. There would be a narrative consolidating all the relevant information. There'll be details around cost, details around schedule performance. We look at risk and status and issues in risk, understanding what's important, what needs to be managed, how important each risk is, and project closeout. Project closeout is one that comes at the end of the project. A company I worked with in my past, an engineering company, for decades they did project closeout reporting really well. Every project that was a part of the process of finishing off a job. And in the recent history, probably the last 10 years, as a practice, that's dropped away. They have not really done that project closeout process. And in dropping that particular process, they've lost the ability to develop the knowledge they learned through the project execution. It's just everybody off of a project, they move on to a new project, and everything they learned is dissipated, it's all gone. So it becomes a very valuable data set, very valuable information for a company to have to understand how each project performed, what worked, what didn't. So the project report, it's a summary narrative, has the key statistics, safety, progress, performance, highlights any deviations from a plan, provides an opportunity to socialise issues, potential, socialise the good aspects of a project, what went well, what didn't, and provides a record, periodic record of what actually happened on the project, which is a good reference point. They need to be clear and concise. A lot of project reports will end up being pages and pages and pages of just written words that don't really clearly tell what's happening on the project. To me, a project report is best when it's very short, straight to the point, and very relevant for whoever's going to read it. They get what they need out of it very fast. Anything that needs to be included to support the project report can be put in attachments and put at the back, but not written into the front of the report. It just makes it too hard to read. Cost performance, one of the key aspects, and it's one of the first things that comes up whenever people start to talk about project reports, is how we're performing against budget. So assessing the cost performance against the estimate assumptions is a key part of understanding what the cost performance is going to be. When we go and develop an estimate for a project, we are developing an estimate in the absence of full information. If it wasn't an estimate, it would be an accounting report. That's when the only time you have everything you need to know about a cost on a project. So in developing those estimates, we've made a bunch of assumptions. As we develop the cost reports, we need to be checking our performance in cost against the assumptions in our estimate to be able to project forward. Another key part around cost reports is having the contractors' reporting requirements. So we all have contractors that work for us. They provide reports to us. They provide cost data to us. But we need their data to line up with our project systems. In order to do that and to stop the project administration and cost guys to having to regurgitate information, we need to make sure that the contractor's reporting is lined up with their commercial terms so that it becomes a straight data transfer. That provides us consistency in the data. Every time we have to pick up cost information and rework it, we take the opportunity to introduce error to what we're reporting. Another key part of cost is change control. This is where we set up a formal system to monitor deviations from a budget. Where we have an estimate, we're based on quantities or we're based on a strategy to execute the work, we're looking for any changes to quantities or changes to that strategy. And provides what it essentially does is it provides a basis to get approval for a change. And that in itself means that we need to elevate changes through the hierarchy of an organisation on a project, which alerts the leadership and the management of the project to oncoming changes. The earlier they get that information, that there is a change, that there's additional cost or a schedule slip, the more time that the management have to react and mitigate any consequence. The other side that we're looking at is schedule performance. We like to have resource loaded schedules. By resource loaded, we mean we take the schedule Gantt chart, the time frame, and we spread the cost, the dollar value, we spread the effort, the man hours, and we spread the quantities of materials that we're going to use across time so we can measure performance relative to time. A cost report will measure performance relative to a fixed sum, but it doesn't give you much of an interpretation of performance over time unless that cost data is distributed per the schedule. Again, within schedule performance, we like to analyse the productivity. Productivity means largely the effort required to complete the work compared to the effort we estimated to do the work. So as we look at the schedule, we're looking at productivity to understand whether we have the right resources. When we've used an estimate, we've developed the resources. We use the resources to load the schedule, and we use the schedule to depict our total time frame. So analysing productivity becomes a key component for us to make sure that we can understand whether the schedule is actually going to be achievable or not. In measuring progress, there's any number of ways to measure progress. But there's a couple of ways that are best, or what we would use, best term is best practice. So the best method for measuring progress really depends on the type of work that we're looking at to measure at any point in time. So what we look at is the type of work, or here is referred to as a product, and the duration. But we have two types of work, tangible and intangible. Tangible is the work that's being done. It's when you're installing pipework, concrete, steel. It's the type of work you can actually go out into the construction site and measure. And depending on what duration that is, if it's 1 to 2 periods, by periods I'm talking about reporting periods. So there might be 1 to 2 months, 1 to 2 weeks, depends how our report is broken down. We can do what we call fixed formula. You start, finish, that's a fair measure. If it's more than 2 periods, then we need to get a little bit more complicated in how we measure it. So we measure it based on milestones or physical percent complete. Physical percent complete is just counting the quantities installed. The intangible work, intangible is more like management activities. They're activities that support the execution of the work. They're activities that support installation. So it might be the quality inspection services. It's work that's needed to complete the project, but not actually physically doing the work. So we look at other methods, which be apportioned effort or level of effort. Apportioned effort means that, let's say we're installing pipe and we've got inspection services for the pipe. If the pipe installation is 50% complete, then the inspection for the pipe is apportioned 50%. It just tracks the same progress as the activity. Level of effort is just how we see the resources being allocated. So if we have management, have 100 hours of management over 10 months, they would get 10 hours a month. It's just a straight level of effort calculation. A little more on physical progress calculations. This is probably the most accurate method to calculate progress. The thing about it is we can't add cubic meters of concrete to tons of steel to meters of pipe and come up with a percent complete. So we need to come up with a method to normalize the progress against each one of these activities. So we look at our quantities and we look at the budget hours, and budget hours represent the estimated effort to do the work. So for each of the line items, we would just take the proportion of the quantity installed multiplied by our budgeted effort, or our budgeted hours, to come up with this concept of what we call earned hours. It's the amount of effort that we've actually finished from a work perspective. From actually getting something done, that's the amount of effort we've earned. And in order to work out a percent complete, we add up our earned effort on each activity, compare it to what our total budget is, and that tells us what our progress is. So earned hours here is, we have a 3,250 earned, that's 3,250 hours of effort we've actually completed relative to budget. Compared to a budget of 12,500, we're 26% complete on this group of activities of installing concrete, steel and pipe. Okay. The next thing we like to look at, I mentioned before about understanding progress and productivity within a scheduling context. So what we need to understand is how our real productivity achieved in the field, in the work being executed, compares to the productivity we assumed for our budget. So again, we start to add up the different aspects of a project. We've got engineering, construction and management. We have our budgeted hours, which reflects our original effort estimated. We have the progress calculated, and then we come up with our earned hours at a summary activity level. Then we start to bring in the concept of spent hours. So earned hours is the amount of work we've done that we have budgeted for. The spent hours is the amount of work it took to get that work done. It's a measure of the effort. So the earned hours is effort earned, spent hours is effort spent, and that's our productivity. In here, if a productivity is greater than 1, that's good. That means it took us less effort to complete the budgeted work. If the productivity is less than 1, that's bad. It took us more effort than to complete what we budgeted for that work. Okay, that covers progress. We'll come back to progress a bit more when I talk on earned value management. But just before we move on to there, I just wanted to touch on risk management, which is another one of the aspects of project control that we report on regularly. I think I know with the project here, the Chile 4 project, you have a risk register. So risk management is really maintaining the risk register, regular updates of the risk register, periodically do a detailed cross-functional review, so all disciplines across the project get involved with the risk register, go through a detailed review, understand the actions that are required, make sure everybody agrees on the priorities, get some leadership team involvement in the meetings, make sure that they understand what's on the risk register, and make sure that any critical risks are included in the monthly report so that it's being elevated through the organisation. The whole thing about the risk register is minimise surprises. Let everybody know what the worst case possible scenario is. I come back here to the historical report that I mentioned before. It's just a consolidation of the project data in a summary format. And sometimes it's really difficult to understand what you want to include into a historical report. So I think the best way to approach it is, if we were to start planning again, what information would be most helpful to plan and estimate the project? So you identify any significant deviations from the original estimate and start to question what the assumptions were in the original estimate and what changed. Was there something missed? Did something get overestimated? And similarly for schedule. Was the durations actually accurate, the original durations in the baseline schedule? Did the critical path change during execution? Did the project achieve the sustained progress? By sustained progress, I'm talking about average rates of installation for most of the duration of the project, normally between 20% and 80%. This helps from a historical report point of view when we go to plan the next project. If we have a couple of these metrics in place, we know we have a reference point of real-time data, real achieved work, and how that can be used to project future projects. And the other key is, did the key risks materialise that were not envisaged at the start of the project? What that basically means is the risk reviews at the early stages of the project, did they actually work? Or did something happen in the project that we didn't think about? All these things help us to prepare and plan better for the next project. Okay, just before I move on to earned value, do you have any questions on what we've covered so far? No? Okay, earned value management, EVM, nice acronym. Okay, to do earned value management, we need to have a cost-weighted schedule. We need to understand what progress complete is against each cost-weighted item. It requires current actual costs of work complete. And it's proven to be effective performance of measurement and feedback in managing projects. So what we're talking about is plan, execute, control in a complete feedback loop. There's a couple of key terms I just need to go through to get the next few slides understood a bit better. We have what we call planned value, which is the value of work planned as a proportion of the current budget. We have earned value, which is the work complete as a proportion of the current budget. We have schedule variance, which is a deviation from schedule for work complete. We have the schedule performance index, which is how well we are performing against our baseline schedule. Are we on schedule or not? And we have a cost performance index. How well are we performing on cost? Are we on over or under budget? And then there's the cost variance. So we start with the project baseline. So value is earned by completing the planned work. When we calculate the total project earned, the best way of weighting is the dollar value of the work for each activity. When we're talking about earned value management, we're looking at the total project. When we look at all the myriad of activities and resources and different things we need to finish a project, the only thing that's consistent across all of it is that it costs money. It's all relevant to a dollar value. So we go through the budget and the estimate, and we weight key activities on a dollar value basis. That gives us a common baseline across the total project. So we start to look at earned progress. Earned progress is schedule performance. How are we progressing compared to the schedule? So I've imposed some numbers here. And what this allows us to do is to plot against our plan how our earned value is tracking. So we can see from this plan in month 6, we have planned at 47.5 and we have actually earned 59. So we start looking at our performance index, we can see that our SPI is 59 divided by 47.5, earned divided by planned. We have an SPI of schedule performance of 1.2. It's greater than 1. We're doing well. We are 1 month ahead of schedule. Then we start to look at the schedule variance. So we look at our the earned minus the planned divided by the planned. Some quick math. And we can see that we have achieved 24% more work at month 6 than we initially planned. So what this allows us to do after we do all this math, which is, as you can see, it's pretty basic math, it really quickly gives us a snapshot of where we're at relative to schedule. We can only do this once we've put all the systems and processes in place to collect the data to summarize it this way. So the next thing we want to look at is our actual cost. So we've already worked out that we're a month ahead of schedule. So now we want to look at our cost. So we come in here, our actual cost at month 6 is 38 compared to our budget or our progress of 59. So you can see here, that was our budget. To a planned budget, this is our actual. But our actual is below budget and our actual earned is above plan. So that's our cost variance. So we're well ahead, we're ahead of budget and we're below cost. So our cost performance is 1.5. Our cost variance is 21, the difference between the earned and the actual. And we can see that we're 35.5% above budget for the work we've finished in month 6. Okay? Again, this is just a high-level indication. It's built off of the data that we've developed through the project, and it summarizes in a quick snapshot of where we sit at any point in time. The next thing we want to look at is estimate at complete. Now, the theory of earned value management says that your estimate at complete is really your budget divided by your cost performance index. And that's a theory. It's okay as a sanity check, but we wouldn't recommend you use that as a forecasting method. For us, the recommended practice is you do a bottoms-up reforecast. You reforecast the cost, you reforecast the schedule, and then plot it on a curve and see where it ends up. So So you just see here, that's where I've plotted in the forecast. We end up with a new EAC. What this does is it provides a high-level tool to provide a snapshot of a project at any point in time. It's a good indication. It's not overly precise. It's not intended to be overly precise, but it does provide an indication of where things are heading and how the trend is working on a project. In one quick snapshot, you've got a picture of schedule and cost. So the application of earned value management, it really needs to be tailored to fit any specific project. There's two basic dimensions of it: granularity, how much detail do you want to look at, and the frequency of how often to analyse. And how granular or how frequent you want to review and analyse the project really depends on how significant and uncertain the project is. If it's highly significant or it's highly uncertain, then you want to do it more often and in more detail. If it's not, then there's no point. This is reward for effort. So the major rigor requires increased granularity and higher frequency. The point with this is that this doesn't just happen. It doesn't come, it's not too difficult. You can see the math is pretty straightforward, but it takes some effort. And there's no point applying more effort than the reward you're going to get for what you're doing here. So it depends on the project as to how much effort you put into it. It's consolidated reporting, so all project reporting comes from any number of sources. There are usually any number of systems involved. It's data collection, it's contractor systems, it's accounting systems. So we try to configure it into a way that is useful and better than any one system of its own. Integrated cost reporting or integrated project reporting is evidenced by accurate forecasts. You can see when a project, in reviewing project forecasts, as to how good the reporting systems are if the project forecasts are consistent and accurate. Incorporating earned value demonstrates the key components of the system in place. Earned value management is a good system to provide a summary level view on how a project's performing. You can't get earned value management without having the scheduling, budgeting, and performance measurement systems in place. So the fact that if we go to some contractors and they can do earned value management and they can demonstrate that it's accurate, that means they have their scheduling, cost, and progress measurement systems in place. Before I look at this Beaumont case study, do you have any questions on earned value? No? Okay. OCI Beaumont. It's a 1.7 million tonne per annum methanol plant. There's $1.76 billion. It's Lurgi methanol technology. By the way, this is all public domain information. There's nothing secret about this. It's located in Beaumont, Texas, USA, which is the US Gulf Coast. When we get into this, you'll see where this project went. The US Gulf Coast has the best database of information almost anywhere, on projects information almost anywhere around. It's well documented. There's a lot of industry in there. So there's not a lot of excuses for getting a project wrong in the Gulf Coast. This company awarded the lump sum contract to a group called Orascom Engineering and Construction, who are predominantly a civil engineering contractor. When we started to review these reports, this is one of the first things that jumped out to us. A methanol plant is a pretty complex chemical facility. Civil engineering contractors generally aren't good at detailed piping, electrical instrumentation, and the systems required for a chemical plant. OEC awarded the contract to Air Liquide, who were the technology providers, to do the engineering procurement work. The original dates for this were EPC start January 2014, mechanical completion June 2017, and provisional acceptance, which is right before production starts, of 15 September 2017. So this plant, theoretically, it should be in operation already. So This information comes from a lender's independent engineer report, reported quarterly. We started to look at these reports back in December. Well, the report was published in December. We looked at it in February this year. So you can see here that all things look great until about here, and it started to go off track. So we tried to have a bit of a closer look. So we've taken it from the engineers' reports. All the engineering looked like it's on track. Remember, it's Lurgy Engineering Lurgy did the engineering procurement for this. Their procurement's on track, almost. There's something happened with construction. So the next step we did was we tried to understand what was going on in construction. So we took the detail from the OCI report, and we took some of our own data from Methanex, and we looked at this is what we would normally call the budget hours for a full 1.7 million tonne a year plant. This is how we would weight it. And we looked at the OCI progress. That's what they reported. And then we come up with our own reported weightings. We determined that we actually thought their progress, from what they put into their reports, was actually 44% compared to what they had published at 48%. Now, 44% to 48%, 49%, that's roughly 1 month of progress. So just on us taking their data, looking at it with what we have as our own information and some reviews internally with some of our own experts in projects, we worked out that already they're over-reported themselves 1 month ahead. Then we started to look at their productivity. Now remember earlier we were saying how productivity is a key in analysing the schedule. So we worked out that based on their progress, our budgets, they had a productivity of around about 1.3. Okay? This is calculated in the inverse. So that says that they are actually 30% overspent on their budget. So the next thing we did was, well, what's this actually mean? Where do we think this project's going to end up based on this analysis? So we looked at their two goes. We said, okay, if they spend 10%, 20% or 30% more than the budget, what's that going to mean to their total project? We know from their reports that they had around 1,800 people on site. So we just take it straight, simple math. Calculate the hours to go, the time they got to complete, and we come up with that they're probably going to end up somewhere between 11 and 13 months late, and it's going to cost them somewhere between $300 to $400 million more than what they had in their budgets. We did this work in February this year. We got hold of their latest report. So we expect the construction complete in Q1 2018 and production start late Q1, early Q2. We did this in February this year. We expected their final cost to be around $2 billion, going from 1.76 to $2 billion. From their Q3 2017 report, the latest report that they published on this project, they finally put into their report that their construction complete would be Q1 2018, production start would be late Q1, Q2 2018, and they reported their capital cost of 1.8. And really, based on the nature of the contract, we probably will never know what the true cost was. We've been watching these reports ever since, and the red marks are what we've updated since we got their initial reports back in February. Now, the reason for showing you this analysis is more to demonstrate the value of earned value management techniques. In February, we don't know whether they knew they were going to be this late or not, but they certainly didn't report it. But from our analysis, that's pretty much what we predicted. Just based on simple earned value, you could see how simple the math is. But the key to it isn't the math. The key to it is putting the processes in place to collect the data to be able to report this way. So what did we find? There was a compounding impact of deficiencies which contributed to their poor performance. They had strategic planning deficiencies. They used a civil contractor instead of a fully qualified contractor. The scope, we found that in their reports they reported a lot of OSBL scope growth, which indicated to us that they didn't really do that engineering well up front. And planning, initially they had 25-month construction schedule, which is not realistic in the Gulf Coast. You know, to try and execute a 1.7 million tonne a year, roughly 6 million man hours on site in 25 months just doesn't make sense. This also highlights the value in Methanex having our own data. These are the historical reports from projects that if we collect it along the way, it gives us the data we in our own house that we know and understand, and we can use to go and do this analysis. Not for other projects, but for our own, more importantly. So all these reports are really good to have. It's a good start. Everything looks great. And until the end, it always comes out in the end. Always. You can't, it's just a fact of life that you can't turn on a plant until it's finished. So doing these reports up front is a really good practice, but if they're not used properly, they're actually worse than a waste of time because they're misleading. So in summary, project control reporting is about knowing the scope in detail. It's about knowing that there's a clear strategy and a plan for execution, and it's well documented. It's about developing resource-loaded schedules with quantified estimates. It's regular measurement and reporting of a total project. Nothing gets left out, nothing gets double counted. And it provides a record for future reference, which is invaluable data for the organisation. Questions? Comments? Look, thanks. Appreciate your time. Hope this provides some insight and some useful information for you. If there's anything you would like to talk about or discuss, or please let me know. Be glad to hear from you.
Jane, based on your experience in Methanex, you see that every site has a kind of a service and control of the project, or is something that is new for us?
I think I wouldn't say it's new, but I don't think it's a skill set that's broadly developed as a skill set. I mentioned before, one of the reasons I put up how much does it cost, because a lot of people will say, you go through the organisation chart and you start seeing these people in here who are doing cost control, scheduling, reporting, and some people say, well, we get the contractors to do it, or we just take the contractors' reports and we use them, and that's okay. You can do that, but you need the people to spend the time to have the dedicated task to analyse those reports and make sure that the schedule's in place and the estimates work and everything is together. If it becomes just a part of someone else's job and it's not their dedicated task, then projects are projects. You just get too busy. It just doesn't get the attention that it should get to get the benefit you can get from it. I mean, not every project goes the same way as OCI either. Some of them are actually, they go well. There's no reason they shouldn't. But what project controls does is it provides an assurance.
Shane, if I could just, Jose, I don't think there's a site in Methanex that really has an ingrained program like this for maintenance activities or even turnaround activities. There's some levels of it done.
Yeah.
Scope development, detailed schedules, and you ensure as much as you can, but doesn't get to this level of detail. From my experience, it doesn't exist in Methanex at the site level right now.
What I've seen on the sites, the few I've been to, is scheduling gets done really well. And I think that's a part of the work. But the scheduling is one component of it. The other component of it is the estimating, so the resource planning, and beyond resource planning for labour resources in the field, the cost of materials, the cost of procurement, the cost of management, all resources required for a project. And then the integrated systems for combined progress measurement. It's a bit of a discipline. And it's a work practice to implement. Yeah.
Because it's true that not all manufacturing site has this kind of tools just to follow. But because sometimes we go out of schedule, out of budgeting, so the idea is just going through and think ahead and try to do something around the law. We can have a small tools just to follow it and try to go in the same line just to avoid
I think that's what this is about. This is about planting the seeds for future development.
Yeah, and and I think a key to it is not trying to do too much too fast. You know, like if you just do it one line on a total project, that's a start, and it's better than nothing. You know, and as the the practices get developed, it becomes easier to implement, and then you get down to the right level of detail. And it's counterproductive to do it at too low a level of detail. You know, sometimes you could do it just at a contract level, but it's finding what's the right mix for a project is the key to making it work. Thanks. Okay. Any questions now? Okay.
There's a way to access that information, that data that you mentioned, when you compare to the OCI project, you see how many man hours. There's a database for that?
We have databases in-house. Methanex we use a system called Aspen Capital Cost Estimator, which is a part of the Aspen suite of tools that process engineering use. But they kind of need to be set up to be used. We have a number of different other references from Methanex from past projects. We have some high-level references from G2 and G1 and Egypt and some of the Chile projects. So we have some reasonable references. And then there's many databases around that you can use to build this information together. And we put the estimates together for the G3 and Medicine Hat projects. And that's helped us develop a more detailed data set. Yeah.
So there's a way that we can access for it. Just here at site, we always wanted to have this database for projects, for estimates.
Yeah.
And there is sometimes it's difficult to gather all the data and to rearrange in a way that you can start to use them in the future projects. Yeah.
There's databases around, but they all need to be calibrated for the site to be really useful. So for Chile, there's lots of references around, there's lots of information around. So to me, the first step is to identify the activities that you do the most, and then start to build up the references for those, and set it up so that it's an expanding knowledge set. You keep adding to it, you keep building it. When you finish a project, you take the estimate you had, compare it to what was actually done, and just do an analysis of it, and write down the analysis and store it. And there's an addition to your data set. It's something that needs to be built up over time, and each site is a little different. The productivity that you get here is different to the productivity you get in the Gulf Coast, which is different to New Zealand, which is different to Trinidad and Egypt. So when we start looking at smaller projects and in-plant projects, it's probably better to start building the data set from what you have in-house. And a lot of that comes from setting up the estimate and how you do the estimate to begin with, and doing that quantity definition that I was talking about there, and understanding what the quantity for the scope is and the man hours for those quantities. And then you start to build up a practice and a data set for your own site, that's what's invaluable. You can't replicate that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your questions.